About 1 hour past a deadline set by the Senate Judiciary Committee for Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and her lawyers to say whether she will testify next week about sexual assault allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Friday morning, folks.
Friday,
I'm Sandra Smith.
One more hour, huh?
Thank goodness.
You got it in you, right?
Yes.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody. Senate Republicans trying to forge ahead with confirmation hearings for Kavanaugh as President Trump doubles down on supporting his Supreme Court nominee, tweeting this about 2 hours ago. Judge Brett Kavanaugh is a fine man with an impeccable reputation who was under assault by radical left-wing politicians who don't want to know the answers. They just want to destroy and delay. Facts don't matter. I go through this with them every single day in D.C. All that coming after the president urged lawmakers to settle the issue last night in Las Vegas.
Why didn't somebody call the FBI 36 years ago? I mean, you could also say, when did this all happen? What's going on? To take a man like this and besmirch. Now, with that being said, let her have her say, and let's see how it all works out. But I don't think you can delay it any longer.
So White House correspondent Kevin Corke traveling with the president from Vegas right now. Kevin, how you doing? Good morning. Well, President Trump pumped up the crowds last night. Heads to Missouri today. Good morning there, Kevin.
Good morning, my friend. You're right. It seems to me, at least, based on nothing more than just sort of how the president has been sort of talking about this, his tone seems to have shifted, Bill, especially when compared to earlier in the week. He's clearly running threadbare of patience for this particular process. Let me take you to Twitter, where he seems to be challenging the motivation and even the memory of Dr. Ford. He said this, among other things, this morning, Bill. He said, "I have no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed with local law enforcement authorities by either her or her loving parents. I ask that she bring those filings forward so that we can learn date, time, and place." Now, to be clear, the president has also said consistently that Ford should be heard, but he is also signaling that she doesn't run the process of confirmation, the Senate does. Last night at the Make America Great rally here in Nevada, he expressed his unwavering support for his nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
You know, one of the reasons I was elected was because you believed that I was going to pick great Supreme Court justices. Brett Kavanaugh is one of the finest human beings you will ever have the privilege of knowing or meeting. A great intellect, a great gentleman, an impeccable reputation.
Now, for his part, Kavanaugh is ready and willing to testify if called, which is precisely why the president is pushing to have this situation wrapped up so his nominee can get a vote and presumably get to work. Now, later today here in Nevada, Bill, the president will be meeting with veterans. Of course, we'll have details of that before he heads off to the Show Me state of Missouri. Back to you.
We shall follow it. Thank you, sir. Kevin Corke leading this hour on the Strip.
For more on all this, let's bring in Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday. Chris, good morning to you.
Morning to you, Sandra.
I'm sure you've got a lot to say on this. What are your thoughts in the 11 o'clock hour on a Friday morning here?
Well, you know, as I was listening to Kevin Corke's piece and hearing the president's comments, and it's clear that, there's been a lot of reporting that the White House has been really trying to top officials to keep the president under wraps and not to go after Christine Blasey Ford. But you see in those tweets when he says, well, I'm sure she must have reported it 36 years ago, so where's the police report, that he's getting more aggressive. There's really the politics inside the confirmation room, and then there's the broader politics in terms of the midterms. When I say inside the room, clearly that Republicans, very mindful of what happened in the Hill-Thomas hearings, do not want it to appear that they are in any way railroading, in any way bullying a woman who claims that she was the victim of sexual abuse. On the other hand, you've got they've got a lot of pressure on the Republicans and the GOP because the president campaigned on the idea of conservative justices. He nominated Brett Kavanaugh, who would be a very conservative justice, and they're under pressure to follow through and to put this guy on the bench. So there's a lot of pressure on them both to give her a fair hearing, but on the other hand, in the end, to end up with Brett Kavanaugh as the next Supreme Court justice. And this could also play out in terms of the midterms. And depending on how that hearing goes, it could be a very much a mobilizing effect for either the Democrats in the midterms or for the Republicans in the midterms.
What did you think of the conditions that she and her legal team laid out? Kavanaugh can't be in the room, Judiciary Committee only, no lawyers allowed, and he goes first.
Well, first of all, I'm kind of stunned at the idea that a witness is trying to dictate to Congress the terms under which he'll testify. Usually Congress sets the terms under which a witness testifies. But this is another indication, Sandra, of how delicate a time we're in the Me Too movement, and that Republicans, even though they're in the majority in that committee, don't want to look that they are railroading Christine Blasey Ford. I think some of the things are easy for them to give on. Have the hearing on Thursday rather than Monday. What difference does it make? Kavanaugh not be in the room. He never would have been in the room. Things that I think are more questionable and maybe impossible to accept are the idea that Kavanaugh would testify first. He doesn't even know what she's going to say. So how can he testify and answer questions when he doesn't know what she's going to say about date, time, place, other people who were at the party? You know, in any kind of trial, the prosecution goes first. They make the allegations, and the accuser then answers them. So I don't think that's going to be I think that will be a non-starter. In the end, you know, she has leverage because of the Me Too movement. The committee has leverage because if she doesn't testify, he's going to get confirmed. She's going to have to come, make a credible case, and own her argument. And if she doesn't do that, then he'll sail through, and she clearly doesn't want that to happen. So my guess is it'll happen. It'll probably be a compromise in terms of what she wants and what the committee wants.
All right, just want to add to this some breaking details that we're getting from our own Chad Pergram right now. He is being told they are not willing, and by the way, this is all after the 10 a.m. Eastern Time deadline. We're an hour past that now. That is the original deadline that was set by Chairman Chuck Grassley. But Chad is being told that we're not willing to rule out a Monday hearing yet, but no one will completely close the door that we get to the end of the day today and no decision has been made, despite the 10 a.m. deadline this morning, Chris. He also is adding to this, we're being told not willing to rule out a Monday hearing yet. Okay, that's the same update there. So I just want to bring that into the picture so you can further comment.
Well, I think that it's like The Godfather. Make them an offer they can't refuse, make them an offer they can't accept. I think there are some things she's asking for that they can accept. There's nothing written in stone about Monday. They could have it Thursday, and that would be an easy give to her. Him not in the room, as I say, I can't imagine he was ever going to be in the room. But to say that he has to go first and doesn't get a chance to rebut her, I can't imagine that Republicans would agree to that or Kavanaugh would agree to that. And you know, as I say, on the one hand, the Republicans, she has leverage because if she feels that she's railroaded and she refuses to testify, and it looks like Republicans were unreasonable, that could help the Democrats in the midterms. But they have a leverage because if she doesn't testify, then I think Kavanaugh sails through and he's confirmed. So, you know, this is only in Washington. It's one of the reasons we all got into this business, because it's a moving target. Yep. We don't even know whether we're going to know at the end of the day. It's one of the reasons you want to watch Fox News Sunday, because we may know more then than we do know. This will change probably 3 or 4 times. We know we're going to have Lindsey Graham, a Republican on the committee, who will be on exclusively to tell us where things stand. We hope to have a Democrat. Last week, all 10 Democrats refused to come on and talk about Christine Blasey Ford. We hope one of them will come on this week. And then we're also going to have an interview with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. The UN General Assembly starts on Monday. A lot of foreign policy issues. North Korea, whether or not they're going far enough, fast enough to satisfy the U.S. when it comes to denuclearization and a possible second Trump-Kim summit, and also the possibility of a trade war with China. Lots to talk about with the Secretary of State.
Sounds like an excellent show lined up. Chris Wallace, Fox News Sunday. And by the way, and I think the further discussion here that Chad was putting, if I can get a few more seconds of your time, was that Republicans are talking about the president's approach to Kavanaugh here, and that he's been consistently pretty restrained in his comments about all this, saying we need to hear from both sides. And he's sort of had this change of strategy that you and I just talked about this morning, especially with that tweet and the comment he made last night at the rally and with Sean Hannity. The radical left lawyers want the FBI to get involved now. He tweeted this morning, why didn't someone call the FBI 36 years ago? Chris, if I could, just final comments from you. Is this sort of I guess Republicans are going to respond this morning to what looks like sort of a changing strategy on the part of the president in reaction to all this.
Well, I can tell you, as I say, that the White House officials have been trying to keep the president, and in fact, he's gotten praise, and he's talked about the fact that he got praise for being so restrained. We need to hear her. We need to hear what she says, but I still very much support Kavanaugh. There's been a change in tone, quite rightly, as you point out, when he starts talking about left-wing lawyers, when he says, well, of course, there was a police filing. We need to see date, time. That might seem reasonable, but we already know from Christine Blasey Ford, she says that she didn't tell anybody, and that sounds like he's not believing her, which is something that I don't know that Republicans want to do before they even hear from her.
Great show lined up this weekend. Chris Wallace will be watching Fox News Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
10 minutes past the hour now. Death toll rising. At least 40, maybe 42 people. Crews getting a better look at the devastation from Florence. Brian Yennis has made his way to New Bern, North Carolina, where damage estimates have already topped $100 million. That's not a large town. A lot of that damage in the agricultural sector as well, where we find you. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Look, agriculture is the state's top industry. We are in Glenn Ipock's farm. This was his corn crop, but 100-mile-an-hour winds snapping the stalks in half. The corn cob falling on the ground in wet mud. Others are now sprouting, making them unusable. Glenn thinks he'll lose half of this corn crop at least, and he's not alone. 6 of the top worst counties hit by floods are also the state's top agricultural counties. And really what they're saying is this storm, on top of the low commodity prices driven by the tariff war, has a lot of people on the brink.
The dilemma is we have a federal crop insurance that we carry, but it's probably not going to pay anything because the guarantee level that I have has probably already been met. So I'm not really expecting anything from federal crop, but we are hopeful they may make some kind of small settlement. Hopefully, we don't know.
It's probably going to put the nail in the coffin for a lot of our farmers who were already financially strapped.
Making matters worse, IPOC has lost a year's worth of tobacco, the state's #1 crop. Loss of electricity in tobacco curing barns has ruined the tobacco, turning it into a chocolate color. Glenn and Jason Bill are Trump supporters, but they say, look, they're strapped in loan debt and they need that farm bill passed now, and that's not going to be enough. They're going to need some farmer disaster relief. This as the flooding continues. Some 4,700 rescues taking place. Those rivers still rising.
Wow.
Eastern part of the state.
Remarkable stuff. More than a week later. Brian Yennis, thank you, sir, very much in New Bern, North Carolina.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo responding to criticism over an apparent lack of progress on North Korea. Why he is suggesting there could soon be a second meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Also, that deadline has come and gone for Brett Kavanaugh's accuser to tell the Senate Judiciary Committee whether or not she would testify on Monday. As we await word on whether or not the two sides can reach an agreement on terms for her to appear on the Hill, we are watching the latest on this next.
I don't think you can delay it any longer. They've delayed it a week already. I have been accommodating. I say, let her say what she has to say, and let's see how it all comes out. But they've delayed it a week, and they have to get on with it.
You would.
Brett Kavanaugh is one of the finest human beings you will ever have the privilege of knowing. A great intellect, a great gentleman, an impeccable reputation, went to Yale, top student, went to Yale Law School, top student. So we got to let it play out.
As the president last night standing behind his Supreme Court nominee as Brett Kavanaugh faces accusations of sexual assault from more than 3 decades ago. Joining us now is attorney and journalist Tim O'Brien, who covered the Supreme Court for 2 decades. Tim, great to have you on the program this morning. You heard the president last night. You know about the deadline that's come and gone this morning. Where does this go?
Well, I think the president's assessment of Judge Kavanaugh seems to be on the money. I, however, and you, however, have known some people, anchors, correspondents, producers in our own industry, who appeared to be pillars of the community and turned out to be something quite different. So this is a tough case. And as your anchor, Chris Wallace, pointed out quite cogently, I thought, Republicans are in a dicey situation here. There was a time when they might be able to look the other way. That is not today with the Me Too movement. They have to treat this witness, Professor Ford, fairly and it has to be perceived as fair. She has to have an opportunity to present her case as best she can. And it's going to be tough to prove that this happened. How does Judge Kavanaugh prove it didn't happen? How do you prove a negative? If you treat her fairly, I think that's in the Republicans' best interest.
Are her requests fair as far as the conditions she's asking to be met in order for her to meet?
Well, I agree with Chris. It's unusual to have the accused appear first. I don't think that's going to fly. Now, certainly, or that whether he has to be out of the room when she testifies is another interesting factor that she is demanding. I think they're going to go along with that. Keep in mind, in a criminal case, you're entitled to face your accuser. But this is not a criminal case. And by the way, the standard of proof is quite a bit different. With Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, I recall senators saying you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. We have a presumption of innocence. That's certainly not the case with Supreme Court nominations. However, she has to come through with some evidence that is clear, convincing, persuasive.
Here's Senator Mitch McConnell this morning.
In the very near future, Judge Kavanaugh will be on the United States Supreme Court. Keep the faith. Don't get rattled by all of this. We're going to plow right through it and do our job.
That was McConnell speaking at the Value Voters Summit this morning. Wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, I think he could be right, but keep in mind the rules of engagement have changed dramatically. The ends seem to justify the means here, that Democrats want to defeat this nomination, just as Republicans didn't want to have a hearing for Merrick Garland. That may have been unfair to Merrick Garland. This may be unfair to Brett Kavanaugh. I think each party views the stakes as much higher than merely an appointment to the Supreme Court. The fact is, it's the court itself that's on the line. The most critical issues of our time, the ones that divide the parties, the ones that divide the country. Today, it's immigration, health care reform, same-sex marriage, gun control. They all come to the Supreme Court. You have the historic issues, affirmative action, abortion, separation of church and state, the death penalty. All those issues go to the Supreme Court, and one vote, very likely this vote, could make the difference. So it may be sad that it's come down to this, but it should not be surprising.
Trey Gowdy was on Special Report last night, and he was laying out what he sees can and cannot happen. Listen.
The FBI can't interview her and Judge Kavanaugh and then repeat back what they say. You can't determine credibility that way. So I hope that she comes. I hope that she will testify. I think she'll be treated fairly.
It's pretty much in line with what we heard from you, Tim, but final thoughts as we leave it off here.
Well, I think if FBI agents were to question witnesses and question people who may be more interested in telling the truth because they could go to jail if they didn't. The bottom line here, however, is simply this, that this nominee, this witness, Dr. Ford, should be treated fairly, and it's very important that it be perceived that she's being treated fairly. Anything else is going to undermine the process.
Tim O'Brien, thank you very much for your perspective and look back at that. Thank you.
21 past. Fox News alert now. More delays in the expected release of declassified documents that relate to the Russia investigation. President Trump saying the Inspector General will now review them. We'll hear from a member of the House Judiciary Committee as to when we will see them. Come on.
Terrifying video showing firefighters in a tug of war with a fire tornado. The crews were battling wildfires in British Columbia when the fiery twister grabbed their hose. Firefighters fought to pull it back, but the firenado pulled it high into the air. Unbelievable footage there. And when they got the hose back, it was melted. British Columbia is in the middle of their wildfire season.
25 past now. I want to get breaking news overseas now. Israeli-Gaza border. Thousands of protesters here on the ground. Images came in a moment ago as a tense situation unfolds. Trey Links from our Jerusalem bureau is there now near the border. Trey.
Well, that's right. We are here along the Israel-Gaza border. If you look behind me here, there are kites being launched over the border, many of those kites on fire, and that black smoke you see from tires that have been set on fire by protesters. Today, though, tension certainly escalating here. This is the 26th Friday in a row that protesters have gathered here along the border. We are getting new numbers today also from the Gazan Health Ministry that says since these protests started in March, 183 people have been killed and more than 20,000 have been injured. Today, though, looking at the scene behind me, any of the white smoke you see close to the ground, that is tear gas being fired by Israeli positions on this side of the border. Additionally, any of those large hills of dirt that you see, those are Israeli sniper positions who have been firing live ammunition at the protesters. Today, though, something different along the border here that we have not seen in past weeks, grenades that have been thrown over the border fence at those Israeli positions by the Palestinians in Gaza. Every once in a while, you'll feel and hear a large explosion. That is coming from the blasts of the small explosive devices that have been thrown over the border. Certainly of concern here along the border for the Israelis is that these protests could erupt into something much larger here in the region. One indicator that this concern does exist for the IDF and the Israeli military is that they have moved Iron Dome positions closer to the border. These positions meant to shoot down any sort of rocket fire that would be shot over the border towards Israel by Hamas. Earlier this summer, we did see a number of rockets fired over the border at different Israeli communities here in southern Israel. But this is certainly something that the Israelis are concerned about moving forward. One other key point here is that these protests have really erupted into something much larger. At the very beginning of the summer, even early in the spring, when gatherings first started here along the border, the focus was very much on specific political moves, such as President Trump moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The protests here today, with thousands of people behind me, are very much focused on long-term grievances that the Palestinians have regarding the Israelis and the relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Right now, there are negotiations that are taking place, long-term negotiations in Cairo, where the Egyptians and also the United Nations are trying to bring Hamas to the table, bring the Israelis to the table, and even the Palestinian delegation in the West Bank to try to find some sort of common ground for all of these parties to avoid a larger conflict. What you just heard behind me, a grenade thrown over the border. I do want to show you the scene here, that smoke that is billowing up, a combination of those explosive devices and also the tires that have been lit on fire by those protesters. We are getting some tear gas here at this position. I'll toss it back to you now, Bill.
Almost sundown. Trey Yingst, thank you. By the border there between Israel and Gaza. We'll watch it. Sandra.
Well, Democrats are still trying to put a vote on confirming Brett Kavanaugh on hold until his accuser can testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. But is this about learning the truth, or is it just playing politics? Ari Fleischer is going to be here to weigh in on that.
Also moving the ball forward in nuclear talks with North Korea. What is happening behind the scenes and how much can we believe? That's coming up.
It's not going to happen overnight. We knew that. But we can't accept half measures. That would be doing it like previous administrations. Right. We have to do this completely, fully, and we have to do it.
There are 8 Senate Democrats now sending a letter to the president urging him to launch an FBI investigation into the allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. This before the Senate holds a confirmation vote. Not sure that's going to happen. Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary under President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, got a little bit more information this hour. We heard Mitch McConnell last hour saying that this was going to happen. Ari, what do you think is the best way to handle this right now?
Well, I'm where I was when this came out, and she should be heard, and she should be heard quickly. I hope the Democrats don't continue to further delay this. There's no point in further delaying this, and the Republicans need to make sure it happens without delay. So have the hearing, let her be heard. She needs to go first, as always. Brett then needs to respond, and then it's time to take the vote.
Okay. Here is the tweet from 4 minutes ago. From the president, he writes this. Senator Feinstein, the Democrats held a letter for months, only to release it with a bang after the hearings were over, in caps, done very purposefully to obstruct and resist and delay. Let her testify or not and take the vote. This appears to be a clear calculation on behalf of the White House to change their posture and to go on offense, Ari. As a crisis communications manager yourself, do you see it that way?
Bill, I think the base is already locked in for Brett Kavanaugh. The Democrat base is locked in against Brett Kavanaugh. The real issue here are the couple swing senators, Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, people of that nature. And the question is, does a Donald Trump tweet help them to make a judicious decision about how they will vote? My suspicion is the answer is no. I think that the real answer here is let the senators be senators, let the witness be the witness, and then let her make her case. If her case is credible, then the senators are going to have to decide what to do. If her case is not credible, then this is a clear shot. But I think it is time for deliberation. It's less of a time for the president to weigh in.
Okay, so what you're making a case that it's the credibility of each person that will ultimately decide this. So once you start to hear them out, the American people, the senators, Republican, Democrats, decide.
Clearly, put yourself in a senator's shoes, and you have two people with diametrically opposing arguments standing before you. One says it happened, one says it didn't. They're going to just have to use their judgment as different senators with different political biases, and that's how our system is made to work, frankly. There is no other way to adjudicate these things. And so at the end of the day, then, it'll be up to the senators to decide. And I do think that the Democrats have one goal and one goal only here, and that is to delay this beyond Election Day so they can protect their senators in red states, Donald Trump states, so they don't have to take a tough vote before Election Day. Whatever they can do to stretch this out, to delay it. And of course, the lawyers for Professor Ford are Democratic donors and Democratic operatives, and so they see the same goal line about get this beyond Election Day. That's a problem, and Republicans, I know Mitch McConnell will never let that happen.
So you're looking at, it won't happen, you're saying, because you're looking at the calendar right now, and how do you forecast
Will not happen. No. Mitch McConnell knows how to steer the ship, to be judicious, to allow Professor Ford to have her day in court, so long as it happens quickly without inordinate further delay. And then the process will proceed. That's the way it only can work.
Now, Senator Whitehouse, a Democrat from Rhode Island, seemed to suggest that if they get the majority back, they'll still pursue this if Kavanaugh's approved.
Well, if you think that Judge Kavanaugh committed rape, then of course you'll pursue it. But again, what evidence is there that he did that? What evidence is there that he tried to inadvertently murder somebody? But if you believe that's the case, then you have a burden to do that, a duty to do that, which makes it even more questionable that Dianne Feinstein sat on the letter. If you're a United States senator and you are given argument, a proof, the allegation, I should say, that somebody did something like that, you have a constitutional duty as someone charged with advice and consent to question the defendant in this case, to ask Brett Kavanaugh, did you do it? She never did that, which again makes the case for me that this is all about delay by the Democrats to protect their senators in red states. It is not about right or wrong.
Kavanaugh put out another statement late on Thursday. I continue to want a hearing as soon as possible so that I can clear my name, he writes. Since the moment I first heard this allegation, I've categorically and unequivocally denied it. I remain rather committed to defending my integrity. Apparently, the opening negotiation on behalf of her lawyers contained the following elements. No lawyers doing the questioning. Only members of the Senate Judiciary Committee can question. Kavanaugh cannot be in the room, and Kavanaugh must go first. That last one might be a no-starter. Is this grounds for a negotiation, Ari?
Look, let me take this out of politics and go right to human nature. If you are charged with doing something, if somebody says you did something horrendous, your natural reaction will guide you. You want to say, I didn't do it. And so therefore you can't wait to go public, sit at the table and tell people, I didn't do it. That's exactly what Brett's done. If, on the other hand, you're making an allegation and maybe you're wrong, maybe you don't remember it right, maybe there are other factors, maybe it was somebody else, you don't quite remember all the details, you hem, you haw, you hesitate. And that's what we're seeing from the lawyers who are now trying to get this into a negotiation. And so I think human nature tells you something very quickly about the willingness of Judge Kavanaugh. He's chomping at the bit from what the White House has said to go forward and talk about this. So in terms of those negotiated demands, look, it's absolutely unreasonable to say that Brett Kavanaugh needs to go first. Who on earth would come up with that? He needs to hear what she says in order to respond to it. Otherwise, it's a kangaroo court. Yeah. I don't think he needs to be in the room. He wouldn't have been in the room in any case, so I think that's a non-issue. And when they say no lawyers asking questions, Bill, what they're really saying is no women asking questions. Think about that. The Democrats who have been making all these charges about men and women and roles in society are now saying we don't want a woman to ask Professor Ford questions. That really is what that's getting at. It's not that they don't want outside lawyers. They don't want the Republicans to have a woman ask questions.
Apparently they offered to have Kelly Ayotte do it, and I think that was rejected. So let's see how that negotiation goes. But you have to think right now Chuck Grassley and others are having these deep conversations and likely debates as well among themselves. Last word, Ari.
It's not up to the witness, though. Congress does not ask witnesses to say who can be your questioners. It's up to Congress. They have advice of consent per the Constitution. The witness doesn't.
Thank you, sir. Ari Fleischer there. Thank you very much, and we'll see what gives. You bet. 21 minutes now before the hour.
Fox News alert: the Trump administration making progress with North Korea on denuclearization. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying the U.S. is making headway, even though it's not always reported. Rich Edson joins us from the State Department, where he just interviewed Pompeo.
Good morning, Sandra. And this week, the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, said that he wants to have a second meeting with President Trump. So we asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo if the administration was preparing for that. He says they are.
We're working on it, but there's still a little bit of work to do left to make sure that the conditions are right and that the two leaders are put in a position where we can make substantial progress.
The secretary also said that he would like to return to North Korea. He had a trip planned, which would have been his fourth to Pyongyang in the latter part of last month, but the administration canceled it because of the lack of progress North Korea was making on giving up its nuclear weapons program. Sandra.
Rich, and he says the U.S. is ready for election interference.
And he says a number of countries are already trying to interfere in U.S. elections, and it goes beyond Russia. He named North Korea, Iran, and China. He also says that the government and this administration are focused on that.
And the U.S. is prepared?
I think we are in a place that we have never been before in terms of our preparedness.
On Iran specifically, he suggested that U.S. policy is working there, and he said the evidence of that is that you're getting a number of European countries that are now leaving Iran and not doing business with Iran as European governments are trying to get their companies to conduct business with Iran to save the Iran nuclear deal. Sandra, back to you.
Rich Edson with a busy day there. Thank you.
Republican lawmakers, meanwhile, demanding the release of classified FISA documents. And now President Trump tweeting about when that might happen. Republican Andy Biggs, the House Judiciary Committee, is our guest on that to answer it. Coming up next.
All right.
About 16 minutes before the hour, the so-called yoga ball killer will now spend the rest of his life in prison. A jury giving a life sentence to a Hong Kong doctor convicted of using gas from a yoga ball to kill his wife and daughter. He did it by filling the ball up with carbon monoxide and putting it inside of his wife's car. The ball slowly leaked and led to their deaths.
The president said immediate declassification of all of this information with no redactions. That was on Monday. Today it's Friday. We have nothing. Who's covering up? DOJ and FBI, the same people who we've had to walk through stonewall after stonewall to get this information out to the American public.
House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, that was there, again calling for the release of the FBI's FISA documents related to the Russia probe. It comes as President Trump says the Inspector General has been asked to review them before any are made public. So let's bring in Republican Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona, member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, great to have you this morning. You obviously heard a very frustrated Devin Nunes there. Where does all of this go next, and what do we eventually get a hold of here?
Well, Devin's right to be frustrated because it has been a continual slow walk. But moving this to the Inspector General is not really where I'd like to see it, because you have to understand that as the Inspector General has done his investigations, he's been limited as well by the DOJ refusing to declassify names and information that he's been looking at. So to say we're going to have a review by the Inspector General makes me very concerned that this information is not ultimately going to get out when we need it to get out. And we've been pleading, begging, cajoling. And I think ultimately we might need to actually get back to the enforcement policies like contempt that Congress has over DOJ.
What should the American people take away from everything you just said and what we heard from Devin Nunes earlier?
I think it's consistent with what we've been saying, that somebody's covering up something. I think they need to understand that. I think they need to understand that every time the FBI and DOJ says national security issues, it's been proven to be false. They're just embarrassed by the information that comes out because they've mishandled it. And they've had bias at the top levels.
Well, here's a bit more from that fired up Devin Nunes from earlier. Listen.
They continue this nonsense of look at all the people who have been busted around Donald Trump. Well, that sounds really nice, but let's not forget This was started as a counterintelligence investigation into a political campaign. So using the people who are supposed to keep us safe, no, they were turned and used against a political opponent.
Wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, he's right, because the biggest problem with all of this is that they're using the power, the police power of the United States to spy and prosecute for political purposes. And we just can't have that in an open and free society like we have in America. And that's where we have to put the kibosh on it. And the only way we can really get to the bottom of it is to declassify this information that we have seen indications of what's in there. We know that there's false dossiers used to spy on Americans. We've got to get to the bottom of that.
Well, the president jumped back in this morning with this tweet. I met with the DOJ concerning the declassification of various unredacted documents. They agreed to release them, but stated that so doing may have a perceived negative impact on the Russia probe. Also, key allies called to ask not to release. Therefore, the Inspector General has been asked to review these documents on an expedited basis. I believe he will move quickly on this and hopefully other things which he is looking at. In the end, I can always declassify it if it proves necessary. Speed is very important to me and everyone. That was the president this morning, Congressman.
Right. Yeah, I saw that tweet, and I was concerned because it sounds like DOJ is again making these claims of we have to be protected, you know, and that's a problem. And it gets back to the Inspector General, who's a great guy, and I've come to know him a little bit, and I trust him. But even he was routed out of the declassification when he was doing his investigation before, and so I'm not sure you actually get to the bottom of it. We need these declassified. We need it done immediately. And we need the transparency that will come with that, so we can get to the bottom of the corruption at the highest levels of our police states.
And real quickly, before I let you go, if and when we finally do see them unredacted, what will it tell us?
It's going to tell us that they used a false dossier. They got information that they shouldn't have got to before the FISA court. They got warrants they shouldn't have had. And it's going to show that they were abusing the power that they had for political gain.
Congressman Andy Biggs of the House Judiciary Committee. Good to have you on this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.
Outnumbered follows us. Quick preview now with Melissa and Harris. Hey, ladies. Good afternoon.
Hey, Bill.
Almost.
So the drama over the Kavanaugh nomination continues, as you know. Christine Ford's lawyer ruling out a Monday hearing, but saying that she will talk later in the week with a list of conditions. Kavanaugh tells the committee he will be there on Monday. Where we go from here and whether the committee will agree to all those conditions.
I mean, it
we'll
literally has changed hour by hour. Yeah, she had a 10 a.m. deadline today to respond. The president at a raucous rally last night for Nevada Senator Dean Heller. He gave Heller's Democrat opponent one of his signature nicknames and also delivered the message the party was hoping to hear. Whether it will deliver for them at the polls in November, we'll talk about that.
All that plus our hashtag one lucky guy outnumbered. Top of the hour. Bill, back to you. Happy Friday.
And to you as well. Thank you. See you in a couple minutes. The straw that broke one state's back. A new law banning plastic straws at restaurants. So how do the owners feel about that? We're about to find out. So first it was the plastic bag, then the plastic straw, and the governor of California signing a bill banning most restaurants from handing them out. There could be a hefty fine if you violate that law. William Lajeunesse is live in L.A. to check in on this. Explain the new law, William.
Well, Bill, first of all, it is largely symbolic, but lawmakers here say they hope it's a beginning and that other states will follow California's lead. Now, some facts. Plastic straws here are not banned, you simply have to ask for one. And it only applies to full-service dine-in restaurants. Critics say if lawmakers really wanted to make a difference, they would have included fast food outlets and coffee shops like Starbucks, but they didn't. Third, violators do get a warning and then a $25 a day fine. Now, in signing the bill, Governor Jerry Brown said yesterday, plastics are choking our planet. It is a very small step to make a customer who wants a straw, plastic one, to ask for it, and it might make them pause and think about an alternative.
It's such a good move. It makes all of us feel just a little bit better.
In today's environment, I think it's insane that we're even having this conversation that our government is going to ban plastic utensils, yet our government can't ban assault rifles.
Americans reportedly use about 170 million straws a day. It sounds like a lot. And 25% of fish sold in markets contain plastic, thus the rationale, Bill, for the ban.
Yeah. So the critics are saying California's a nanny state, and they point out inconsistencies, William.
Well, it's true. California takes pride in being a very progressive state. And yesterday, Los Angeles did vote to ban the sale of fur. Brown also signed a bill mandating that restaurants only advertise and serve children milk or water unless a parent asks for soda. He also, however, signed a bill allowing people to ride a scooter 35 miles an hour without a helmet. San Francisco, by the way, gives out 400,000 free syringes and needles a month to addicts, but they only collect about half of those. Many of the rest end up where? On beaches and city streets. So many California cities do ban plastic straws entirely. Malibu, styrofoam takeout containers. The goal, however, is to ban all single-use plastic items, say silverware, if you will. That, supporters say, could come next year. Back to you.
It's on its way, perhaps. Thank you, William Lajeunesse there in L.A. Thank you, Sarah. Sandra.
All right, lawyers for Brett Kavanaugh's accuser laying out the terms for her Senate testimony. But the deadline for her to agree to testify has already come and gone. So what happens now?
What makes